What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening with the economic calendar moving forward and why Tesla's in a very, very critical place right now. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000 or more, you're guaranteed 30. And the offer ends very soon at the end of March. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with this market. So looking at Tesla, we got this big red bar yesterday before we tried to rebound. We were holding support very nicely, but then today came and Tesla ended up slowing down a bit. We have had a lot of negative news over the last couple of days. That's negatively affecting Tesla because we're just barely at the support zone right here. So the question is, will Tesla lose the support and start dumping, or is Tesla about to see a big bounce? I'll give you guys more insights about this in the next couple of minutes, but let's first talk about some news. So as far as the news is going, okay, we've had some good things and bad things that have come out. On Monday, President Trump has halted the distribution of federal funds for EV chargers, and he signals that he is going to be seeking to cancel the tax credits of up to $7,500 for people who buy new EVs. That's not the best of news, at least for Tesla. That's part of why we're seeing some downside. And just know that this administration is going to be a mixed bag for Tesla. There's going to be very good things that come out of it, from AI development to the deregulation that's going to be coming, but simultaneously there will be some things that hurt them, such as the disruption to the EV tax mandates and other factors like that. So that's going to be very, very big and something worth mentioning. That's part of why Tesla saw a little bit of downside. Despite that, there was also some good news that came out. We have Wedbush that is now seeing a $2 trillion valuation for Tesla by the end of 2025. Wedbush analyst Daniel Ives now has a price target of $550, increasing it from $515, keeping an outperform rating. He mentioned that under this next administration, under Trump's administration, it's going to be very, very good for Tesla when it comes to developing autonomous driving, and he thinks it's going to be a total game changer for the share price. He also mentioned that AI and autonomous opportunity is going to be worth at least $1 trillion alone, so that's going to help Tesla's market cap in a much larger manner. He also thinks that there's going to be a big increase in deliveries demand for Tesla for 2025. So he's very, very bullish nonetheless for the end of 2025. So bullish news for Tesla. There was also good news that came out. And obviously, there are views that Trump's administration is going to help Tesla in different ways. So I'm seeing this all over the news. That's why I always bring that up. However, the biggest catalyst for Tesla is not this news, but what's happening next week. And exactly 1 week from now, on January 29th, we have Tesla's fourth quarter earnings. Whatever they announce is going to cause a lot of volatility, so get ready for that. And I'll be talking about this maybe more in detail in a later video. Now, Wedbush gave Tesla an outperform rating, so did Piper Sandler, both saying Tesla's going to be going to the 500s, which I agree with, but it may take some time to get there as we're seeing some new signals. The price-risk ratio is dipping just a bit because Tesla's losing some strength. If you look at the last couple of days, we're showing some weakness compared to the broader markets. On top of this, when it comes to our seasonality, Thursdays tend to be one of the weakest days of the week. We're only green about 47% of the time. And we tend to see the most volatility at 11 o'clock a.m. and also at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So just keep that in mind. Besides that, I'm not seeing anything else that's too crazy for Tesla. I also want to mention that in terms of our heat map, the market was kind of mixed. We saw big tech stocks like Amazon, like Microsoft and Nvda holding up the market. But you have to remember that most stocks were actually more flat or red. If you look at finance, we saw a lot of red. So did consumer durables, utilities, and many other sectors. So keep that in mind, guys. That's why we saw the market in a mixed bag. On top of this, I want to add that for tomorrow, it's going to be Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. We have initial jobless claims coming out in the morning, continuing jobless claims, and more data just like that. So we'll see what that leads to, at least moving forward. Might cause some volatility, so get ready for that. On top of this, I want to mention that for other factors out there, tomorrow we have GE Aerospace announcing earnings alongside American Airlines, so we'll see what that leads to. Today we had P&G and Johnson & Johnson. Already went over that in the morning. Both of them did very well, beating on expectations and raising their guidances. So they did really well. Already went over that. And then we just had Discover announce their earnings. They did relatively well, beating on EPS with $5.11 above expectations. Revenue at $4.76 billion above expectations. And everything else was quite decent. So the share price is still up as a result of that, so not too bad. Last but not least, we have the fear and greed index currently at fear. This is getting very close to neutral, so we'll see what kind of reaction we get as we approach that. Momentum is at neutral as we saw buyers return at the 125 daily moving average. So buyers have returned, at least for the markets, but we're at some tough resistance right now. The put to call option ratio is at neutral as we're seeing a lot of puts being close to more call buying. And the VIX is currently at support, so we'll see if we bounce or not. So make sure you watch that at least very closely. So what is my view of Tesla? What do I think is going to happen from this point on? I'm just going to focus on technicals. I just want to mention that Tesla's not in the best of places because one could argue that we have what appears to be like a left shoulder here, a head up here, and then possibly a right shoulder that could be forming if we do get a rejection. And if we break the neckline area, if we lose the support, okay, especially around that 414 area, there's going to be a risk of us potentially, dipping all the way back down to this imbalance, taking us down to about that 400 area or below. So you want to be very careful if we end up getting that rejection. Now, if we hold 414 and we try to bounce off of this, you want to see Tesla hold above 420 or so. If we do reclaim about 420, we could continue to ride this trend line up and try to invalidate the head and shoulders to try to push even higher. But my concern is that I'm seeing some signals that suggest that there could be a small dip coming to SPY, the QQQ, and the others. So that also adds to the momentum that could shift for Tesla, leading to some possible downside because the market does affect Tesla to some extent. So my concern is that we are starting to reject here. We're barely holding support, and there's a lot of relative weakness in Tesla. As the whole market may pull back just a bit, this might cause Tesla to dip as well, and there's going to be a risk of some downside looking at the way this is looking. I also want to mention that if you look at the last couple of days, Tesla was making higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. But in this case, we had a high up here, we came down, made a lower high, and now we're starting to slow. So that could be a sign of a slight reversal. So in my opinion, it's very simple. If Tesla does not hold 414, we're going to be dipping all the way down closer to about 407. And if that fails us, we're looking for a move back down towards the much lower 400s. If we manage to reclaim 420, we're looking for a move back up to about 425. As of right now, we're favoring downside because when you look at the daily, we got this bearish looking candlestick and a rejection. And also because of the fact that we had a red day, whereas the market was more green, and we have a head and shoulders setup. So the most likely possibility is, and always remember to watch your levels just to be safe, but it looks like we have a possible head and shoulders, and Tesla's barely holding support. If we lose the support, we might be dipping lower to come down to these lower levels into the lower 400s. That looks a bit more probable to me, so we'll see if that ends up being the case. As far as SPY is going, I called out this whole move, guys. I said that we're breaking out on SPY, and because of Trump's inauguration, there's going to be a lot of momentum taking us close to all-time highs. I've been saying that for the last couple of days, if you guys look back at my videos, and I was correct about that. And now what I've been saying is that even though we've gone close to all-time highs, SPY almost hit the all-time high, we're at some tough resistance and we're at a historical chop zone. Notice that we're starting to reject right here. And there is one thing that's a little concerning about this move. It's not that healthy that SPY is pumping like this because we have 1, 2, 3, 4 big gaps left on the chart, on the daily chart. There's even more gaps when you zoom in more, but just know that that's a little bit of weakness that's developing. So if we get a U-turn here and we end up losing support at 605, I think SPY could be dipping to fill that gap, returning to 602 to 603. That's also going to be a test of previous resistance becoming support in the 602s. Okay, so I think there's going to be a risk of that if we end up losing support. If we break 608, we're looking for the 610s. It's always still possible for us to go higher if we break the 608 area. So make sure you watch your levels just to be safe. But what I predict is going to happen is that we might be looking for a little liquidity grab, then potentially a dip right over here. I think that we pumped really hard and we're starting to show some signs of rejecting on the daily. And I have a feeling we might be coming down to fill that gap back down towards 602. So there might be a small pullback. And then we'll have to see, does SPY bounce after hitting 602 and starts to break all-time highs, or do we just continue to fall back down into the 590s? We'll have to see about that. But I do see a risk of some downside in all honesty, guys. So make sure you watch your levels just to be safe. Notice the QQQ has a similar setup. We pushed up to 533. I called out 533 to 535 as my target. I had these levels marked yesterday. We hit 533, but we weren't able to break it. And we got a small rejection off of this. So we're going to be watching to see if we get a follow-through move. Notice on the daily, we have a wick here. We have one big gap. We have 2 big gaps. We have a lot of gaps below. There's actually a third one down here. There's a lot of gaps, and this move was not that healthy the way we just pumped really quickly. So I think that there's going to be a risk of us coming down to fill at least the first gap. We have one gap on the 4-hour at 527. And there's also another, not only a gap, but also this like imbalance around 525. 524, a little bit below 525 basically. So I anticipate what's going to happen tomorrow is a move like this where we start to dip. If we break 533, we're looking for 535. And if we lose 530, we're looking for 527 at the very least. I think we visit 527 to 525 in that range, and then we'll see if we get a bounce off that or not to start dipping below. So watch for a pump and a rejection, and we'll see if we get a bounce or not. So watch these levels very, very closely, but look for some downside as the most likely possibility looking at this chart. On the IWM Russell 2000, we have a very similar setup. I say that because of this rejection we're getting right over here. If we're bullish, we want to break 230. If not, we could be dipping lower. I'm favoring that this is a rejection and we could be dipping closer to where this imbalance is, taking us down to 227. There's also a gap to fill at 225, so I think we might be dipping to 225 to 227. And we'll see if we get a bounce or rejection, so watch this very, very carefully. We're nearing a bearish cross on the PPO. We have a gap to fill, and we're getting a rejection filling to break 230. This typically signifies what's going to happen is we actually get a small rebound like this to test our key fib level before we start dipping, but we might be coming down to fill that gap, so watch that very closely. For ES, we're at resistance around the 6100s. We have previous support becoming resistance up here at 6125. We'll have to see if we break through that or not, and if we can't do that, there's going to be a risk of us returning back down. So watch 6125 as our resistance. If that does not hold us, we could be dipping to about 6100, then 6073. I think we might dip like this before it sees a bounce or a rejection, so watch that very closely. But so far, it's showing some signs it's beginning to slow a little bit. So I think that there might be a risk to retest 6100 or below. NQ needs to hold 22,000. If we hold 22,000, we could be pushing to about 22,200. And if we don't hold 22,000, we could be continuing to dip back down towards previous resistance becoming support at 21,800. So watch to see if we get a bounce off of this or not for a move just like that. Right now, I'm favoring a little pop and a drop, and we could be dipping to 21,800. So watch to see what kind of move we make. For Bitcoin, Bitcoin also happens to have a left shoulder, a head, and then a right shoulder. If we lose 102,500, we're going to be looking for a dip back down to the lower 100,000s. If we break past 104,000, we're looking for a bounce. With this head and shoulders like pattern here, this looks a little bit weaker, so I do expect us to test 102,000, and we'll see if we bounce off that or not, but it still favors downside a bit more. Now we're going to talk about the rest of these individual tickers. So starting off with Nvda, there's a possible cup and handle that could be forming. We'll see if that ends up being the case if we do get a rejection here. If we hold above 147, I'm looking for 150 as our target. If 147 does not hold, we're going to be at risk of returning to 144. And if that doesn't hold, 142 and then 140 become our supports. My gut tells me we might dip a little bit and form kind of like a cup and handle like this. So we're in a range right now on Nvidia, and there's a little bit of weakness here. We pumped very nicely only to start slowing in the after hours. Might be a small dip to 144 below before it tries to bounce again, so just keep that in mind. Once again, Tesla is showing some weakness. We have that head and shoulders, left shoulder, head, and then right shoulder, and we're not holding the support very well, so this could be favoring downside, so just keep that in mind. For Aapl, we're showing some strength. As long as we hold 220, we're looking for a bounce for 224. I want to see us hold above 225 to really start pushing for 227. Might be a small rebound for 225 and 227, so we'll see if that ends up being the case. For Netflix, I anticipate that this is going to be in a critical place. We might see a bit of a pullback on Netflix, but we're going to be testing previous resistance becoming support right here at 937. So I anticipate that this could be dipping to 937 like this, and we'll see if we bounce or not. If we don't bounce, we're going to be dipping to the lower 900s, so we'll see about that. But I anticipate a little bit more downside right here towards 937 or below. For MSTR, just know this. We have a nice double bottom like structure that's been developing. It's kind of like an inverse head and shoulders, but we're starting to pull back a bit after we got some negative news. So with that happening, guys, there's a little bit of weakness on this chart, especially as we're seeing crypto slow. So watch 374. If that does not hold us, we could be dipping to about 360. And we'll see if we get some kind of bounce or not. So watch that very closely. I'm anticipating it's going to be dipping lower towards 360. And we'll see if we get some kind of bounce. So just keep that in mind. That's going to be very key for the way we end up moving. I anticipate we might be dipping lower. So watch to see if that ends up being the case. And we'll see what happens from here. Celsius is looking a little bit weaker. We're losing structure right over here, and we're barely holding 25 as support. We got to hold that, or else this could dip even lower. It looks very weak right now as we got some negative news because of the fact that it is facing a massive lawsuit right now. That's the news that came out. So with the litigation that's going on, this could continue to fall like this. If we don't hold 25, we're looking for essentially 24 flat. Supermicro is looking decent. We have a double bottom, so it is bullish, but we have a tough resistance at our 200 EMA. So if we hit this 200 EMA, we could see a little pullback first before it tries to break out later on, just like Nvidia. So it depends. If we break 34.5, we could be pushing higher. If we fail to do that, we could see a little pullback to 32 before it tries to bounce. And I favor that a little bit more. So please keep that in mind. For pounds here, we're on a very, very nice uptrend. I think it's very bullish. It's a very bullish looking stock. However, for the short term, it already pumps so much. Okay, so keep that in mind. We were in the 66 area just a couple of days ago. Now we're already at almost like 78. So I think we will be hitting 80 very soon, but might be a small pullback to 75. If that does not hold, we're looking for 72.5, and then we could bounce up to 80 if that ends up being the case. So just keep that in mind. Might be a little pullback and a bounce as the most likely possibilities. So please keep that in mind. For a few more, we have Rivian. It's showing some weakness after some bad news came out involving, a big shift in what different analysts are saying, and also because of the EV news. There's a left shoulder, a head, and then a right shoulder, and also a bit of a downtrend here. So this is favoring downside towards 12.5 or below. If that fails us, we could be dipping even lower towards the low 12s, and we'll see what happens after that. SoFi has this big red bar that formed here. I think what's going to happen is we rebound a little bit, just like this, and then we could continue to dip back down towards 16.7. And we'll see if we bounce off that or not, but I do see a risk of some downsides. Just keep that in mind. AMD is also dipping right over here. We have a nice double bottom like pattern. I think we could be dipping towards 121. We'll see if we hold 121 or not. 120 to 121. We'll see if we get a bounce or not off of this. So give this the time it needs. I think we could be dipping a little bit lower towards 120 to 121, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get. For ARM is looking a bit more bullish on the 4-hour time frame. We have 180 as our resistance. We have the support around this 175 area. I think that because we pumped so hard after this news that came out involving, some new funding, I just want to say that this could dip a little bit, see a small little pullback before it attempts to continue. I am anticipating there's going to be a little bit of a dip. We could be getting very close to that 170 area. So the support right over here. I was actually looking back at this previously. So right here, 170 to like 172 is where we have the support. I think we might be returning to that before we see some buyers step in. But overall, it's still looking bullish. Just keep that in mind. Coin is looking so. We're in a range right now. We've struggled to break past 300. So there's going to be a risk of us returning to about 285 before it tries to bounce. So give this some time to progress. If we hit 285, we'll see if we get some kind of bounce or not. But I do anticipate there might be a small dip here because we're struggling to break past 300. So just keep that in mind. Amazon is going to likely dip just a little bit, but here's what's going to likely happen. We have this previous resistance becoming support here. Look for a dip to 232. If we bounce off this, we push up to about the 235 to 238 area. If we don't hold 232, we dump to about 230. So just keep that in mind. Look for a dip to 232. We'll see if we get a bounce or not. So keep that in mind, at least moving forward. For Meta, we have a nice cup and handle that could be forming. It looks bullish overall with this nice looking structure, but it's in a range. As we hit 635, we tend to reject, and as we hit 590, we tend to get bought back up. This is starting to reject here, so it could be returning to where these EMAs are around that 612 to 616 zone. We'll see if we bounce. Overall, like I said before, it's just a range. That's all that Meta is doing. It's in a range right now, going back and forth between these key levels, so just keep that in mind. Microsoft is going to likely return back down to about this previous resistance becoming support at 442. So we could be dipping to 442. We'll see if we get a bounce or not off of this, but watch that very closely. But I anticipate there could be some downside coming, so just keep that in mind. Google's also forming a nice accumulation, but the problem I see with Google is the fact that we're not holding 200 very well. If 200 fails us, we could be dipping back down to about 197.8. So we'll see if we bounce off that or not. So keep these levels in mind. 200 is going to be a very, very key level for us. If we don't hold that, we could be dipping to about 197.8. So please keep that in mind, guys. Might be a small dip here, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get. For GameStop, we're looking for essentially 28 and 28.5 as our resistances. There's also a nice wick forming here, so this tends to favor upside a little bit more. For AMC, we have a low here. We came up, made a higher low. I would like to see us try to break past 3.5. If we can't do that, we're going to be dumping more. I'm seeing some weakness here. It might rebound a bit and start dipping lower, so I still see a risk of that. DJT is looking a bit more bearish. We could be dipping a little bit lower towards this previous resistance, becoming support around 32.5. The VIX is also in a very interesting phase. We're trying to hold support right here around 15, but just know that we'll have to see if we get a bounce or not off of this. That's going to be a very, very key thing that we do. As far as the VIX goes, though, we'll be watching to see if we get a bounce. If this gets a big bounce, this could be a signal that it's going to be because of the market potentially pulling back a little bit. The 10-year is going to make a big move depending on FOMC. This is starting to show some signs of bouncing. And the dollar is starting to bounce a bit. If it breaks 108.5, it's going to try to bounce more. We'll see about that, though. May also depend on FOMC. So as far as Tesla goes, don't worry too much about the potential pullback that could be coming because earnings is going to be the next big factor. There's a possible head and shoulders on the 4 hours, the left shoulder, head and then the right shoulder, which could be favoring some downside into the lower 400s if we lose support here, especially at 414. So we'll see how things end up going. With that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. Please have a good rest of your day. And I'll be back with another update in just a day from now. So I'll see you guys before the market opens. Have a good rest of your day and peace out.